Oh, okay. They said to wait until Susan sat, and I did it. I literally couldn't have hit that faster. The committee will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess of the committee at any time, and this hearing is entitled Modernizing Legislative Information Technologies, Lessons from the States. As you can imagine, this is the most high-profile hearing happening in the Capitol today. I want to recognize myself for 5 minutes to give an opening statement. So 5 members of this committee, including myself and Vice Chair Graves, served in state legislatures before coming to Congress. And serving the Washington State Legislature was a great privilege for me. The experience taught me a lot about constituent engagement, about legislative process, about the vital role of that staff play in helping elected leaders do their jobs effectively. And today's hearing will feature state government employees who design and implement technologies that help elected officials better serve and help citizens better connect. New technologies can help us become better public servants by making it easier for us to engage with our constituents and by streamlining legislative processes. Technology also empowers citizens to follow and contact their representatives, to track legislation, and to participate more directly in the process. And Washington State, for example, has set up remote video testimony, which allows citizens who can't travel to Olympia to testify by video before committees. I believe one of our witnesses, Mike Rohrbach, who's the Chief Information Officer for Washington State, is going to tell us more about that innovative system. In fact, all of our witnesses today will share examples of how their state legislatures are experimenting with new technologies. And experimenting is the key word here. Trying out new technologies inherently means taking risks, and that's something we tend to avoid around the marble buildings here in our nation's capital. Sometimes there are good reasons for that. Our systems need to be secure. Members and staff need strong cybersecurity training in order to understand and avoid security risks. Now, that said, Congress should encourage technological innovation, even if it means some experiments will fail. And too often, a risk-averse approach leads us to the status quo rather than to the cutting edge. Representative Kathy McMorris Rogers summed it up best, in my view, when she said Congress is an 18th century institution using 20th century technology to solve 21st century problems. Our technologies need to evolve along with the demands of our jobs, and Congress should invest in its own capacity to keep up with latest technologies. Some of our colleagues on other committees are incorporating new technologies into their hearing processes. The House Natural Resources Committee, for example, has installed an electronic voting system, which speeds up the recorded vote process. Members of the House Armed Services Committee are using tablets to streamline the enormous task of marking up the National Defense Authorization Act. These are just 2 examples of how technology can make us more efficient. But the possibilities are endless, and modernizing technologies helps us advance our goal of better serving the American people. And that's what this committee's focus is on today and moving forward. And with that, I'll now invite Vice Chair Tom Graves to share some opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to everyone here on the panel. And as the chairman mentioned, as a former state legislator myself and several here on the panel, the scenery may be a little different here for us than from our states, but our mission to serve our constituents and to improve our communities remains the same. So this committee's charge has been to think big and to bring innovative solutions to the House. And so I'm excited about the conversation we're going to have today because I really believe the states are a great laboratory of wonderful ideas that maybe Congress should look to. Already this year, when we were creating our first round of recommendations to open up Congress a little bit more to bring transparency, we highlighted a capability that was available to the Georgia State General Assembly that I served in, and I believe also in the Washington State as well, but not available to members of here in U.S. Congress. And it was the ability to track changes to bills and amendment text in real time, something that we would think would be very, very simple, is not available to us here. So we prioritized that project in our transparency recommendation. So my hope is today, in this hearing, that we'll learn of many, many more innovations that, while seem simple and are easily implemented at the states, are not being used here. And that the new technologies in state legislatures that you might be experiencing and working with, how we might be able to adapt some of that to us. So really delighted to have you. We thank you for being here today. And Mr. Chairman, I look forward to the hearing. Yield back.
Thanks. Today, we welcome the testimony of our 3 witnesses. First, Mike Rohrbach is the Chief Information Officer for the Washington State Legislature. He's been with the legislature since 2006 and has been the CIO since 2016. He's responsible for leading a nonpartisan technology solutions agency which delivers all aspects of technology solutions and services for the Washington State Legislature. Mr. Rohrbach has 28 years of progressive technology leadership experience spanning the public and private sectors with a strong background in custom software development, systems integration, and project management. Second, Diane Boyer-Vine was appointed Legislative Counsel of California in 2002 and has worked in California's Office of Legislative Counsel since 1988. The Office of Legislative Counsel is a nonpartisan public agency that drafts legislative proposals, prepares legal opinion, and provides other confidential legal services to the legislature. It also provides computer services, data networking, and related customer services to the legislature. Ms. Boyer-Vine is a member of the California State Bar. She serves as a member of the California Law Revision Commission and the California Commission on Uniform State Laws. And finally, Nelson Moe is the Chief Information Officer of Virginia and leads the Virginia Information Technologies Agency. He was appointed by Governor Terry McAuliffe in June of 2015 and reappointed by Governor Ralph Northam in April of 2018. As CIO, he leads a 200-person organization responsible for oversight of IT infrastructure service contracts, as well as governance of the Commonwealth's IT procurement, cybersecurity, and enterprise architecture. Before becoming CIO for Virginia, Mr. Moe served for 3 years as CIO for the U.S. House of Representatives. In that position, he was responsible for the vision, enterprise strategic planning, budget implementation, cybersecurity operations, and risk posture, business continuity management, and IT services for the members, leadership committees, and staff of the U.S. House of Representatives. Prior to his service in the House, Mr. Moe had a career in the U.S. Navy as a nuclear submarine officer and then worked in the private sector for several small companies and an IT startup. Witnesses are reminded that your oral testimony will be limited to 5 minutes, and without objection, your written statements will be made part of the record. So, Mr. Rohrbach, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to give an oral presentation of your testimony.
Chairman Kilmer, Vice Chairman Graves, and members of the Select Committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before this committee. I'm here today to talk about some of the ways that we in the Washington Legislature use technology to support citizen engagement in the legislative process and how technology facilitates and improves the operations of our legislature. We believe that technology should support and enhance legislative operations and not hinder them. Transparency and information availability are keys to a modern legislature and an engaged citizenry. Increasingly, citizens want a consumer quality experience when interacting with their government. Signing up to testify before a committee should be as easy as booking a hotel room, and tracking a bill they care about should be as easy as tracking a package, and they want to do it all from their phones and tablets. Engagement and transparency begin with our public website. Our website provides a wealth of information. You can learn about the legislature and legislative processes, communicate with legislators, and obtain information on bills, laws, committees, and legislative agencies. You can track bills, committee hearings, and floor activity, and make public records requests. Our website has won an Online Democracy Award from NCSL and has been recognized as one of the top 3 state legislature websites by Congress.org. We continue to upgrade our website to ensure that citizens have a high-quality experience when using our website from phones and tablets. We are also investing in accessibility compliance so that people with disabilities can obtain the same information as those without disabilities, including older people with changing abilities due to age. We offer subscription services for receiving email and text notifications on bills, topics, and committee hearings, as well as free web services and RSS feeds. Our committees use an electronic sign-in system and remote video testimony. We also leverage technology for public records retention and disclosure. We have invested in our infrastructure so that staff and visitors to our Capitol campus have a first-class and free Wi-Fi experience, as well as reliable cell phone coverage. On the operational side, we provide hundreds of contemporary systems and technology services that support all legislative processes, from bill drafting to committee and caucus collaboration onto our chambers, where members use touch panel voting and request-to-speak systems, and where our rostrum staff can control voting systems, chamber display boards, and audio and microphone systems. They can also publish floor calendars, process amendments, and track voting, all in real time. One of the achievements we are most proud of is the Braille integration of our Senate voting system. It allows our blind lieutenant governor to seamlessly preside over our Senate and navigate the chamber without the assistance of a sighted person. Automation and electronic documents have significantly reduced our printed materials. The modern workforce is no longer constrained to a desk. Mobility and security have been a key focus of our modernization efforts so that legislative staff and members can access all the information they need, whenever and from wherever they may be working. We also continue to leverage cloud services. All of our email is in the cloud. We utilize the cloud for a variety of staff member, committee, and legislative workgroup needs, including documents, secure collaboration sites, and disaster recovery. This has provided numerous cost, security, mobility, and feature advantages. We have made great strides with our cybersecurity program, which is based on national federal standards. We provide a variety of cybersecurity trainings and consulting tailored to the unique needs of our legislative staff and members. We have also implemented multi-factor authentication, or MFA, to prevent unauthorized access to legislative email systems and documents. That was a really big deal for us. In order to set up our members and staff for success, we offer customized and tailored training on legislative processes, systems, technology, and cybersecurity for all new members and staff. We also offer refresher training in the form of classroom or one-on-one training, and we are beginning to leverage pre-recorded video training sessions. In closing, I'd like to talk about the key to making this all work. We have proven that technology staffing size is no barometer for success. Technology is not the key to success, nor is it a barrier. It's people. It's people that create the policies, it's people that create and design the systems, and it's people who use these systems and consume the information. To effectively leverage technology, you need the right people. We are very fortunate to have the right people. Our committed and competent technical and customer support group staff partner together with our customers and governance committees to strike the right balance of high expectations for technology with reasonableness and understanding. I believe that overlooking the importance of people and solely focusing on technology and process will hinder any technology, data, or efficiency efforts. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Ms. Boyer-Vine, you are now recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Chair Kilmer, Vice Chair Graves, and members of the committee, on behalf of the California Legislature, I thank you for inviting me here today. The Office of Legislative Counsel has been in existence for over 100 years, originally providing legal services to the California Legislature and the governor. Over the years, the office has extended its services into information technology through the Legislative Data Center, commonly known as LDC. LDC provides technology services to all 120 members of the legislature and to legislative staff in partnership with the Assembly Committee on Rules and the Senate Committee on Rules. Today I have with me Sora Mansourian, the CIO of the Assembly Committee on Rules. I want to present to you the member portfolio, which is a web application. It was project started several years ago with the California Assembly. It's part of an effort to become a paperless legislative body while taking advantage of mobile technology, allowing members access to information anywhere, anytime, securely. Much of the information used by legislators in their day-to-day activities previously was in reports and binders. LDC has developed several legislative systems that were integrated into this portfolio, and now members have access to that material paperlessly through an iPad that's provided to them by the Legislative Data Center. The portfolio is designed to function in a responsive manner using HTML and cascading style sheets to automatically shrink, enlarge, or resize a website to adapt to all devices with different screen resolutions. It provides members with access to information on the floor and in committees. And I'll describe some of the features of the portfolio today, but we also brought an iPad with us if anybody wants to look at it after the hearing. It provides the ability to dynamically generate various types of legislative reports that are exported to PDF. For example, if during a floor session, a legislator would like to know which bills are on call, he or she can generate a report using the portfolio. Staff and legislators can upload documents and automatically annotate them through the portfolio. Another feature of it, which is useful for constituents, is the ability to view opposition and support letters to legislation. Advocacy groups, as well as the general public, can utilize the position letter portal to submit their position on a measure to a committee electronically. Upon submission, the letter is available to be viewed by committee staff. This is handled through a different application which LDC developed called the Committee Services Application. Once the letter is accepted, then the letter is available to the members on the portfolio. Staff recommendations and notes and caucus recommendations are also provided dynamically during a floor session to the members on the portfolio. Members rely on this feature to have up-to-date information before voting. Each house of the legislature maintains a daily file which shows the agenda for committees and floor session. The portfolio provides the ability to list all the bills that are on the daily file. The display allows the bills to be sorted by the item number of the bill, bill identification, author, or location. The feature provides an up-to-date snapshot of which bills are scheduled to be heard during floor session, which bills are on call, and how many bills are remaining during the floor session. The portfolio has the ability to display vote information dynamically from the moment voting is recorded for an item on the daily file during the session. The system also provides for the ability to refresh itself. A user can then export the unofficial vote tally into a PDF document. And in California, each time a bill is introduced or amended, it's printed on a public website and an internal website for use by legislators and staff. And then each time a bill is amended, it's published again on those websites. From version to version, the changes are shown in strikeout and italic text, but the version-to-version change is the amended bill to the prior version of the bill and not to the underlying existing law. When we upgraded our bill drafting system a few years ago, we were able to enhance the user experience for members, staff, and the public to allow for functionality known as amends the law. So this shows the change from like the 16th amended version of the bill to the underlying existing law. And that's available through the portfolio as well. So as you know, legislative work is fast-paced, hours can be long, meetings and events occur in multiple locations, and there's a vast amount of information for legislators to digest from multiple sources. The portfolio allows legislators the flexibility in conducting business in this environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moe. I recognize you for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Kilmer, Vice Chairman Graves, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. As a preparatory note, my remarks for the committee are my own, based on my observations and experience. They do not reflect the position of the Governor Northam's administration. However, I am here in the administration's knowledge and consent. My testimony today will cover the importance of innovation and modernization within the government public IT sector and the difficulties from my perception to achieve it. It will also cover what the Commonwealth has been able to do to achieve what I believe is a fundamentally transformative way for obtaining IT infrastructure services and sourcing, contracting. I'll go out on a limb at the end to provide some suggestions to the committee with respect to policy and governance, and finally, I'll close with a very optimistic view of the future for government IT. As you said earlier, there is a constant drive for government IT managers to provide constant, effective, relevant, and reliable services while managing and maintaining innovation with technology options and the technology life cycles. Citizens are demanding IT experience from government that they get from Silicon Valley. Nothing earth-shattering here. My message to the committee is about the tortuous path that a government IT manager must follow to achieve innovation and modernization. Sometimes all that can be achieved on a day basis is keeping the lights on with minimal service improvement. The path includes, for the IT manager, understanding the business and objectives of the organization, managing the existing services and expectations. This can be the expectations can be high, especially internet access, website availability, and email delivery. The path includes timing the necessary steps for successful procurement action, implementing the existing and integrating the new technology, and anticipating the funding implementation recurring that includes working through the appropriation process and ending spending constraints. None of this is easy, and the government IT manager is not incentivized to take risks. In my experience, the key factor to being able to innovate at the speed and scale necessary is based on the integration capability of the organization. Since I left the House of Representatives, I found that this is a growing field of industry expertise, and the field of companies that do this well is expanding. For the past 8 months, the Commonwealth has employed a professional IT service integrator supplier and 7 separate best-of-breed suppliers for its infrastructure: email, mainframe, servers, storage, networking, and so on, and printing. My agency is using this model to provide the 63 separate executive branch agencies in Virginia, such as VDOT and DMV, for all their infrastructure needs. This amounts to about $360 million in annual spend, and it supports over 60,000 Virginia employees and hundreds of their applications. We are performing this at lower cost than the original supplier contract. It ran from 13 years starting in 2005, and the savings amounts to over $114 million over 8 years at about 6% per year. But more importantly, we're adding new services at a much higher rate. In this fiscal year alone, we're going to add 40 new services for the agencies to include more data circuit choices, laptop options, and cloud services. This model The key here allows the individual agencies to focus on their citizen-facing applications to provide noticeable difference and differentiation value for the Commonwealth. A few states have started on this path, but I believe the Commonwealth is the first state in the nation to fully achieve this integration model for its infrastructure needs. How would we do this? In 2008, the Commonwealth shifted its sourcing approach and contracting strategy to be build to adapt. This service structure contract allows us for adding capabilities to the existing model, even if an existing provider is in place. There's a non-exclusionary clause. Additionally, there is significant contract language to transition out a supplier in case they don't perform. The model's like Legos. Each part is competitively bid and awarded, but designed to interconnect. We awarded contracts to the supplier integrator and 7 infrastructure providers, and service level agreements and operational level agreements are key to keeping the team on the same page working together. We're still working the kinks out, but we're making progress every day. We had long-term planning in 2015, or 2000, spanning 2 administrations, legislative sessions. To get to this point, it took significant stakeholder management and the ultimate goal from this new service contract. It also built on groundbreaking efforts started in 2005 to consolidate. Just a quick note on cybersecurity. This is a top priority for the administration. The advantage of this new model is it builds to adapt and allows me to hire best-of-breed suppliers to bring in any time we want to for specific events. I would suggest the committee consider additional consolidation of commodity IT infrastructure and focus on enhancing the ability to provide high-value differentiating IT services for members. Determining where the House is on innovation versus risk scale is important. In my Navy nuclear power career, there's a fundamentally process risk mitigation focus driven. IT innovation requires some acceptance of risk. In conclusion, I'd like to close my expression of optimism for the future. Innovation at the speed of scale can be done, and by at least one objective measure, we are nowhere near the full potential for IT. Let's say that one page of my testimony represents the Internet of today and its connections and data sources about 1/2 the square foot. The Internet of the future can be as large as the orbit of Neptune, the 8th planet of the sun. Setting up policy, governance, and service contract framework and architecture is key to realizing this mind-boggling future. This concludes my remarks, sir.
Thank you. Thanks so much, and thanks to all 3 of you for your testimony. We're going to head into questioning, and I want to start by recognizing myself for 5 minutes for questions. I want to start, Mr. Moe, with where you ended. So you were former CIO of the House, now current CIO for the Commonwealth of Virginia. So I think that gives you a pretty unique perspective to share, and you talked about the importance of risk-taking when it comes to considering and introducing new technologies into a government setting. I was hoping you could elaborate more on that, and as CIO of the House, did you feel empowered to take risks? And give us a sense of what the downsides of being risk averse are, and whether you've had a different experience at the CIO in Virginia.
Yes, Chairman. So from a risk perspective, I felt empowered to take risks here when I was in the House, but more on a tactical, smaller level. I didn't have the authority that I have in the Commonwealth of Virginia from an IT procurement perspective, so I'm able to minimize some of the risks there and be able to align the procurement approach versus the expectation of delivering a service. That's one area, and risk can be manifest either in cost or schedule or institutional problems or lack of institutional reputation. Being able to work with the Office of Attorney General at the Commonwealth on a daily basis helps me miss that. And then the second half of your question was, I forgot, Chairman, it had to do with, bear with me.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit it. I was more just trying to get a sense of the difference you've seen in your experience as CIO of Virginia.
Oh, yeah, you asked me a question about whether if you're risk adverse, what's the downside?
What's the downside of it?
Yeah, one of the things I've learned, and if I could pass on the committee, and I've had to do this to my own staff, is for some reason I had to inject the word opportunity. They never used it. And so, hey, we have an opportunity to do something big here. We get to do this. And it was a constant drumbeat. So that's the one thing that I realized, that with risk comes some realization of opportunity. If you don't do that, you don't realize the opportunity.
Mr. Rohrbach, I wanted to dive in with you. In your testimony, you talked about the importance of having the right people. I wanted to get your sense how you recruit top-notch tech talent. Obviously, that's a challenge here in Congress in terms of competing with the private sector for talent. And also was hoping you would touch on how your office manages procurement and device management across legislative offices, whether it's standardized across offices, everybody gets the same stuff, or whether members have a choice in what kind of devices that they use.
Yes, Chairman. kind of start with your first question. We're very customer focused. When we recruit for tech talent, we are recruiting on aptitude and attitude as much as hard skills. So we are not going to compete. We're 50 miles from Seattle. We are not going to steal people from Amazon and Google and Microsoft. Occasionally we get lucky and they want a lifestyle change. So we focus on aptitude and attitude and that customer focus, having empathy for the customers. And we use a variety of tools in our recruiting to do that. Profile assessments that are used in the hiring HR industry in general. We have a couple tools in our toolkit. And that's just the focus of ours across the board. It's having empathy for the customer. Members are customers, legislative staff are customers. It's very easy as technologists to sit around the room and craft solutions that work for us but no one else. And the second question was about procurement and consolidation. Yep. So all member offices do get the same standardized set of equipment. So in our legislature, the responsibility for that rests with the chief clerk in the House and the secretary of the Senate. We do all the procurement, but they, the chief administrative officers, oversee that and those policies. And so the way we've been able to deal with the growing needs of members, technology, is to expand our fence and our perimeter, make more applications mobilely accessible, all of our email being in the cloud. Really negates the need for a lot of custom technology in the member offices. And so that's where our focus is, because we think that's the safest. And it would just be untenable to have to worry about 147 member offices and each with their own different technology needs.
Ms. Boyervine, yeah, the app you mentioned, the member portfolio app, sounds really interesting. I'm curious how easy or difficult it's been to get 120 members of the California legislature and legislative staff and everybody trained and on board with actually using it.
Mr. Chair, that's a very good question. Actually, only 80 are using it. The Senate hasn't come along to that level of technology. The CIO who's with me today has spent a lot of time individually with each member's office and the committee staff as well to get buy-in to this paperless environment, because as you can imagine, it's not easy to get buy-in. And so I think his effort and the effort of the Speaker of the California Assembly and the CAO of the Assembly Rules Committee has gone a long way to making the functionality available and something that the staff and members want to use. I think members want to use it, might be staff who are a little more reticent, particularly with things like the support and opposition letters for committees being uploaded.
Gotcha. Thank you. Let me now recognize Vice Chair Graves for 5 minutes for questions. He's yielding to Ms. Brooks.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much for all of you coming and presenting what your states are doing. I'd like to start out with you, Ms. Boyervine. In May, our committee adopted its first set of recommendations, and one was to make sure that what is called the POSI Comparative Prints Project continues to stay on track, and it ensures that bills can be in a searchable electronic print that shows how bill changes current law. Incredibly useful, I think, for the public, and you talked about your amendment process. And obviously, California has been providing comparative print on both public and internal websites, is that correct? And are they the same? Is the content, is there any difference in the information posted on the public versus the internal website?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. There's no difference in the content. The only difference would be in timing, so that the information comes a little bit more dynamically on the internal website to members and staff than it does on the public website.
And based on your website analytics, how popular have the comparative prints been?
Very popular. It wasn't actually available to us till we went to an XML bill drafting system, but I think it's probably one of the most transparent features we have, and it's one that was asked for by members of the legislature and predominantly lobbyists who use our work a lot, but also the public. So I don't know the specific numbers, but it's certainly anecdotally, it's very popular.
How long has California had the ability, the comparative print?
A couple of years now, about 3 or 4 years.
And
we've always published, the amended version. We don't go from introduction to enrolled, but this comparative about 3 or 4 years.
Okay. And how delayed is the public version?
A few hours. We do downloads at 4 times 3 or 4 times a day.
Okay, and how about Mr. Rohrbach, State of Washington?
Congresswoman, I'm at a bit of a disadvantage. I'm not a legislative process guru or junkie. I do know that we post all of our amendments in real time, so to both members and the public, they see everything in real time as it's entered in the system. You know, our amendments are pretty standard. You see the striking language and the italics, but I will get back to the committee on the comparative analysis to make sure I don't tell you something that's untrue.
Well, and speaking of real time, I'm curious whether or not any of your states provide real-time or live feed of votes. Because right now, our system, it goes up on the board, up on a tally, but it's not real-time to the public at this point, is my understanding. Mr. Moe? Does Virginia?
I'll have to look into that. It's not my area of expertise. Congressman Brooks, I'll find out for you specifically real-time voting.
As to whether or not the members of the public can see how individual members are voting.
Yeah, on any issue. I'll have to
Yes,
find out.
they just see the aggregate, they don't see our individual votes. Ms. Boyer-Vine, does California?
No, we're doing the same. We do live stream every hearing and session, but it's the aggregate vote.
Okay, and,
This I do know about. So in our chambers, in the House, we put all the member votes up, so they vote in real time with touch panel votings, and so they will see names on 2 big display boards. We have an external facing version of that that doesn't have the names. It just shows the aggregate totals.
I see, okay.
In real time.
And you mentioned in your testimony, Mr. Rohrbach, one of the features on your website is the comment on the bill feature.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk with us a little bit about how popular has this feature been? How's the legislature used? How are the comments actually submitted to the member
Sure.
or to the body?
Yes, it's been very popular. It's been in existence for about 4 years, and it's morphed from its original intent to how it's used now. So the way it works now is a constituent can go find a bill on our website, and there's every bill summary page has a comment on this bill. It takes you to what we call our district finder, so you must enter your district, your address. That validates your legislative district. You must enter your name and address, and your email address. And then it gives you, by default, it shows you the 3 legislators that represent your district, so 2 representatives and 1 senator. It also has options for whether you're pro or con, and an opportunity for comments, and an opportunity to indicate whether you want a response. So the way it's different now and it's morphed is that the data became overwhelming. So it sounded like a great idea. The problem is member offices have to deal with all this communication. So thousands and thousands of comments coming in on bills. Our member staff indicated pretty early on that they did not appreciate the notion of having to go to a separate system or database to look at all these comments. So it's morphed a bit, and now every piece of constituent communication, including bill comments, gets funneled to email with standardized subject taglines, because that's where the member's office, the staff does their business. So it's used more of a barometer now to see what's trending.
Okay, thank you. Yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Delbene.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all of you for being here. I appreciate it. And Mr. Rohrbach, I want to thank you for coming all the way from our Washington out here to speak with us today and talk about a lot of the successes you've had in terms of streamlining technologies. A couple of you and Mr. Rohrbach, you talked about mobility as well, because we are never sitting at a desk. We're walking around on the floor in committees, on an airplane, in the district. And so we're working through a lot of these issues so that we have access to information wherever we are. And Mr. Rohrbach, I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you've addressed mobility, especially for legislators in terms of access to information.
Yes, thank you, Congresswoman. The way we deal with mobility is, the first thing, I mentioned this before, but all of our email and more of our data is in the cloud. So that just provides an inherent advantage.
From any device.
From any device, correct. So any iOS, Android, or Windows device is basically what we're talking about. The other thing we're doing with our modernization efforts is all of our new applications, we're rewriting them. They're all web-based. So they don't need a high-powered computer to run. They'll run on any device that has a browser. And so they're all accessible. We make sure that they comply with standards, so they work in any browser, all the 4 main browsers. And to go along with that, there's a security component as well. I think that's been our biggest issue that we had to deal with. And so I talked about recently implementing multi-factor authentication to give us a peace of mind. So now that we have that in place, we can continue to expand our network. And so Rather than thinking about allowing devices into our network, it's a mindset change of where kind of changing where the fences are on our network and where we're putting data. So it's more like a concentric circle. You know, some data and systems are really tightly managed and physically protected. So our voting system, for example, will never be accessible outside of network. But you have these concentric circles. If you go out to committee and caucus staff, constituent communications, and they're moving further and further out from our network. And so does that answer your
Yep.
question?
Yep. Actually, when you try new technologies, do you have legislators help test those? Are they beta testers for you?
Yes, ma'am, we do, absolutely. It's actually one of the keys to taking some of these risks. So we have a very involved Technology Oversight Committee made up of 4 members, one from each of the caucuses in the House and Senate. And so, and then we kind of, we're very strategic about it. So when we try these things and we do pilots, we always look for members who are risk takers and risk averse. So we've tried to find the right mix of members and member offices. And once members get buy-in and legislators get buy-in, they can influence their colleagues. You know, they can talk about it's not as scary as we thought. It's a better experience than we thought. So that's really key to us, having pilot groups of members.
Mr. Moe, you talked a little bit about that too. Do you have folks part of a beta testing process, or how does it work in terms of trying new technologies?
We have 2 major injection points for innovation at the Commonwealth. One is just ideas, and it's set up for basically any supplier can come in and talk to, in this case, an agency, or the House would be a committee or a member. And there is an opportunity to do proofs of concepts or discussions. But it has nothing to do, that's independent of any type of procurement action. That's one area. And then the contract itself allows us for innovation and incentivize for innovations. And we do, as part of that, involve, in this case, my stakeholders, which are the agencies, their particular IT staff and their end user groups, to be part of that whole conversation.
I actually, Mr. Rohrbach, I meant to ask you too, when we talk about mobility, and you talk about Wi-Fi, do legislators use the same Wi-Fi as the public might use? And do you have any capacity issues with your Wi-Fi? How's it set up?
No, ma'am, they have their own special Wi-Fi network just for members and staff, because we initially had 2 Wi-Fis. So we had our legislative Wi-Fi that has access to all of our corporate assets, and then we had a public Wi-Fi, and we found with more and more people using the public Wi-Fi, we had bandwidth issues. So we created a whole new kind of pipe out just for members and staff. And so only members and staff can get on with their personal devices. It's exclusive for internet access, as bandwidth needs just continue to get gobbled up with high streaming video and everything. So members have their own.
And it's available throughout the campus?
It's available throughout the campus. We've invested substantially in what we call a distributed antenna system throughout the old Marble building, so that we have good Wi-Fi coverage and cell phone coverage
Great.
throughout.
Hey, thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Woodall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. It's not lost on me. You were 3 of the brightest innovators in the nation, and each of you brought your paper testimony to read before us today. I guess that's risk-taking versus innovation, Mr. Moe. The 3-ring binder is tried and true technology, and it's not gonna fail us. I'm sensitive to that. There's this drumbeat to do more with technology, sometimes just in the name of doing more with technology as opposed to providing additional functionality. How have you all policed against that to make sure that your investment dollar was going to needed functionality as opposed to perceived technological advancement? Is there an easy answer to that question?
Well, we've done it both ways, to be fair. Starting out with just innovating for the sake of innovating, and then realizing that we didn't approach it from the business perspective. So we have 2 ends. I have 350 IT staff alone. The front end staff are all the customer service folks who listen to the business needs and then work with the back end to make sure it's not just for the sake of technology and it's really meeting a need. I share your concern about not having paper and have worked a lot on how you authenticate and preserve kind of the electronic world. So I share the concern, but we use our kind of customer service people to give us the ideas, working with our rules committees on what's really needed.
Did you find that, Mr. Moe, when you were here, that we were innovating for the sake of of innovation, or while you were here, were you driven for functionality?
Congressman Woodall, from my perspective, my memory was we were driven to support the members and their day-to-day execution because we were fundamentally focused that they could get their business done because they only had 2 years or whatever, and they would start right away to set their offices up and set their staff up. So us, it was more, I'll call it knife fight innovation to get through the day. And because we didn't, because the culture then and now was, hey, the members have a tough enough job for legislation to get it all through, just get them what they need. So we didn't tactically innovate. And I would like to answer your question about how we govern at the state of Virginia on IT procurement and by code. All the IT investments go through my office. And I have to go through, and they're not funded at all by our budget office. The agencies are not funded by our budget office until I say that particular plan, that particular project fits in with the overall strategic plan and the individual agencies' strategic plan. So I get to say no a lot and yes sometimes.
Now, we've talked about resetting up the Office of Technology Assessment to have brains around, maybe rotating brains from the outside to help us identify that. Is the way the Commonwealth has it set up, you were the sole and final arbiter on whether or not technology is going to move the Commonwealth in the right direction or not?
The short answer is, Congressman, is that the process is run through my staff. I have a dedicated staff of 20 people that look at these things not only individually for the agency, but also across the board. And I approve it. At the end of the day, they can appeal that. The agency can appeal the decision. But so far, we've been able to answer all their needs and make sure that what they want fits in the overall plan. And fundamentally, they just want the technology to work. Agencies are focusing on the application layer, and the commodity IT is what I do day to day with infrastructure. They just want it to work. So,
Mr. Rohrbach, I can't help but notice in your testimony are lots of the good ideas that this committee has considered. I don't know if that's a Washington State thing, that has percolated through the committee. We have grappled, though, with whether we should be inward-facing or outward-facing. Lots of legislative markup conversation. No conversation about casework and privacy waivers and uploading sensitive medical records so that folks could advocate on their behalf with the state Medicaid programs, for example. Has the drive in Washington and California been to serve the members internally or to allow members to serve their constituents externally?
I always see it in several bubbles, and those are not mutually exclusive. Serving the members is important, and then we have a whole legislative constituent management system that every office has basically to serve constituents. It's a case management system for constituents and to reach out to constituents as well.
Do you know the Washington State model, Mr. Rohrbach?
Sorry about that, sir. It's very similar to California. It's both. The challenge we have, and it's where our cybersecurity program has really been a point of emphasis, is all of this constituent data, this private sensitive data that's being collected by members and committees and member staff. We have to really protect it, so that's been a big challenge for us. We actually try to discourage that as much as possible because when you don't have that sensitive data, you don't have to worry about protecting it, but we know that legislators are going to continue to get that data from their constituents. But we have a very active cybersecurity training and consulting around that.
Thank you all for your counsel.
Ms. Lofgren.
Just first, thank you for your testimony and your willingness to share lessons learned with us. It's very helpful. It's good to see a fellow Californian here. I was mentioning to Mr. Graves that when the former members of the California Assembly or State Senate come here, they're shocked by how little support there is for them as compared to when they served in the state legislature. So there's some things we could learn from that generally. I'm also mindful that you suggested that there are 350 IT staff for the California legislature. For the House of Representatives, the CAO has 295 employees plus about 90 contractors. So when you think about the scale, I mean, the House of Representatives has far more members and serves a far greater population than the state of California, and it might be something we need to examine in terms of our capacity to serve given the number of employees we have. I'm just wondering, Mr. Mo, I was intrigued by your testimony about risk-taking, and we all know that it is it's impossible to compete financially with the tech world. Starting programmers in tech companies earn 3 times what we are paying very experienced people. So how do you do the risk-taking when you can't really compete financially with, for the staff?
Congressman Lundgren, thank you very much for your question. The model we have set up in the Commonwealth of Virginia is that we have essentially shifted that cost burden of the high-tech staff to the suppliers, the vendors. And my staff is primarily contract management, project management, governance management, and oversight. And so from a attraction of talent, we do get plenty of people, even in today's economy, even in today's specific, that want to work at that model because we have pretty good benefits. We tend to get more of a senior group, and then we try to tackle it. But I don't have to get the high-end talent that that moves back and forth.
Thinking about, there are things about working for the government that are more stable. You're not going to have to sleep under your desk while getting a product out. You do actually have a pension and health care and the like. I'm wondering, and we're working on this right now, what are each of you doing to prepare for a 5G world?
I can speak to that, Congresswoman. We're already there. So I mentioned earlier in my comments that we have upgraded substantially in what we call our distributed antenna system, or DAS, throughout our campus. And so we upgraded 2 years ago, and our infrastructure supports 5G as well as the coming 6G technologies. And so we made a substantial investment in that to be proactive.
All right, now I'm going to put on my lawyer hat, and I'm not an IT person by training. I would have to get back to you, but I think we are working on that.
Thank you.
And for the Commonwealth of Virginia, the architecture of the contracts allows us to bolt in any 5G services that come available. So we just opened a storefront, so as they become available, Congresswoman, we're gonna add those like a Legos. So nothing specific like, hey, we're gonna do the 5G, but we have a direct relationship with Verizon. That's our local exchange carrier and also our providers. So as they roll out 5G services in Virginia, we'll be able to take advantage of that.
Great. Thank you very much, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Timmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First question is for Mr. Mo. So in your time here at the U.S. House, what did you work on to help change things? What revolutionary ideas?
Wow.
Top two.
Top two. Okay, 2 things is from my perspective, first of all, thank you for the question, Congressman Timmons, is that from when I first got here and in the 14 years, we went from an area that did not have very much Wi-Fi at all on campus. And also, we only authorized BlackBerries. And toward the end, we were probably satisfying every single type of phone that was manufactured.
Did you leave?
I left December of 2015. No, January 2015. December 2015. I left. Yeah. So I've been gone a little over 4 years. And so at the time we focused on adding more cybersecurity. We had really fleshed out our continuity of government aspect, not just business continuity, continuity of government services. We'd also added more focus on cybersecurity for member websites. And we had addressed being able to provide more, let's say, Wi-Fi infrastructure on the campus so you could at least have connectivity. We got like 1,000 access points in less than a year just to throw them, to put them everywhere.
As it relates to wireless, there's still parts of the campus that don't have wireless, or that allege that they do, but it just doesn't work. Is this put a number on it. Is this 10 million or is it 100 million? Or, how do we fix this problem, and how do we even maybe add a secured network to overlay the public network?
First of all, thank you for the question. The way from an infrastructure perspective you're looking at is the mobile connectivity is you look at the total demand, expectation, driving, and then the density of the devices. And then as that grows up, you add more and more of these things. So it'd have to come back to, what the expectation wanted. In this case, the campus is relatively small. It's a relatively contained environment. You can put dedicated infrastructure pipes in and out to provide the service. It would depend on just what the expectation is to support this, not the members and the committees, but also the public, because that'll drive a lot of what you want to do. And that, to answer your question about the numbers, what's your expectation for their experience?
Was there conversations when you were here regarding a separate secure network where we were controlling bandwidth for members and staff?
If I recall, yes, there was. We had some conversations about being able to provide access points for specific things that were dedicated to certain applications from a security perspective.
Thank you. Mr. Rohrbach, legislative process-wise, we have a big problem right now where our schedules all overlap. We're on 2, 3, 4 committees, a number of different subcommittees, and they overlap schedule. Is that something that y'all have had to deal with?
Yes, Congressman. Yes, our legislators have the same problem.
Were y'all able to use technology to help address it, or is it still just an issue?
I don't believe there's a technology solution for that. I think that's still an issue. It's a scheduling bandwidth issue. That's my opinion on that.
If you're a committee chairman and you're determining when to have a committee hearing in your state, do you at least know what other obligations your committee members have, or is it just, schedule here and hope?
Sir, I'll have to get back to you on that. I'm not sure about the visibility that you have into other committee members. We do have, a lot of our systems have updated committee schedules and hearings, so you can look you can have a member view and a committee view. I believe that the committee staff is really responsible for finding that information and identifying conflicts.
It seems like it would be possible to have just an algorithm where my schedule is at least just available to the committee chairman so they know. Just my committee hearings and my subcommittee hearings and votes is another thing. Just so they're aware of conflicts, they don't have to abide by them, but so they know that 8 members have subcommittee hearings at the same time throughout the campus. That may be helpful. Is it something like that available to Washington?
I do not believe we have that available right now, but I also don't think that it's risen to that level in our state. I think that's my simplest answer right now, sir.
Does California have any wisdom on this?
Unfortunately not. I think it's probably the same answer that Washington has. I mean, we have set hearings and set committee members, so they know they're always meeting this day and that time, but technology-wise, nothing to address it at this point.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Cleaver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Boyer-Vine, actually, you've already made my day. It's, I think, refreshing to know that the California Senate is also backward. But it's just my opinion. I am interested, Mr. Rohrbach, in the website. And if you've gone over this, I can pick it up later and don't have to waste any more time. But is anybody going through this? I'm interested in a couple of things. Number 2, resources for students and teachers.
Yes, Congressman, we have a couple of resources on our website that talk all about the legislative process and explains the process for students to come visit our campus. We have a page application that we recently developed that's externally facing, where students can apply to be pages and sponsored by Congress, by representatives, and that makes that page application process makes its way all the way through to administrative staff and scheduling functions. We also have youth legislature days in our state legislature where schools come and they participate in the legislative process. They will sit in the chamber. They will speak like members. We update. We have test versions of our voting system, so they will see their names up there on the display boards, and it's a really big popular deal in our state.
How long have you been doing that?
The youth legislature has been around at least 12 to 15 years, and we continue as we get more and more information. We post those resources to our public website to make those more available.
Thank you. The other was the legislative hotline. I'm very interested in that, but also I'm wondering if there's any level of expressed frustration I mean, the word hotline is like immediate, there's an immediate response. But I'm pretty sure that that's not exactly what happens. Can you?
Yes, sir. It's not an immediate response, and we do explain to constituents when they call. So the hotline has evolved. At one point in time, the hotline was really the only way you could, before email, was the only way you could let your legislators know about your views. And so right now, what happens is our legislative hotline staff will take the information, but they actually use our public bill comments system to enter the information just like a constituent would, and all that information gets funneled the same way. So we have about 4 or 5 different ways that constituent communication all goes to member email. And so we do explain that that's the process, and that it is up to the individual legislators to whether or not they're going to respond. But we do ask them when they call, would you like a response? It's all the same questions you would have if you were filling out the form on the website.
Okay, and the public bill comments, I'm assuming is pretty much the same.
Yes, sir.
Well, no, thank you. These are things that's jumped out at me and are very interesting, and I appreciate all of you for being here today. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chair Graves. Sorry, Davis.
And I was watching his list over here, written list, that is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was curious, just sort of following up on Mr. Woodall's thoughts there, and the lack of trying to implement something that may be a great idea that maybe doesn't help with the process or the function or the connection with constituents or whatever it might be. How do you make those decisions? Where do you get your ideas from? So in our case, we may have a single individual person, a constituent, recommend a new technology or an idea that could be remarkable, but we really don't know how to get that through a filtering process of implementation. Or we may have an abundance of individuals asking for us to implement something that is maybe a fad or something that's popular but maybe not as useful. And then there just may be a lot of new technologies that we have a lack of awareness of that would be very helpful. What is the right process, or is there a recommended process that you might help us with to allow for the implementation or the engagement of new ideas to ultimately be vetted, and whether or not it would be applicable or not, or helpful or advantageous, all the way through an implementation process? Is there maybe a system you have in place that you could advise us on? And I'll just start here. You seem to have a
Yes,
lot of
Vice
great
Chairman.
ideas.
Yes, I can speak to that. So we have a pretty robust customer engagement and oversight process, a governance process in our state. So I have 2 oversight committees. One committee is the Chief Clerk and the Secretary of Senate. Another committee is that committee of members that I talked about. We also have a very active customer advisory group. So we have about 30 legislative work groups throughout the legislature. That's the House and the Senate. So a caucus is a work group, right? The LAs are a work group, and so we meet once a month with them, and we talk about this very regularly. In addition to meeting once a month with them, I also meet with one of my oversight committees, the Chief Clerk and Secretary of Senate, monthly, and we talk about. So that's how all these ideas bubble up. So nothing's a surprise. Everything's vetted through the lens of, does this add value versus something that someone wants to do? Because we have that engaged governance process, our members do a lot of the heavy lifting for us. So if a member office really wants this hot new gadget, I will talk with the members of my systems committee, and they will actually go talk to those members and determine, is this just a one-off? Is it something we can support? So our governance process really supports that naturally. A regular cadence, a good customer advisory group where these things are discussed.
And that's great to hear. Maybe as a little follow-up that each of you could add as well. What is the general life cycle of that, from a recommendation to implementation or disposal of an idea? Is there an average number of months or years before?
Well, sir, I think it depends on the impact and the complexity. I will tell you, with multi-factor authentication, we moved at light speed. So from the day we got the initial approval in March of this year to full implementation, we finished at the end of June. So that whole thing took 3 months. But there was about a year of buy-in, educating stakeholders, educating legislators on why we should do this before our Systems Oversight Committee said, we're doing this, do it now, do it as quickly as you can. So that's an extreme example, but it was because of the risks. Systems changes can take, 6 months to a year. It just depends on where we are in the legislative cycle.
Great, thank you. Ms. Pine, yes.
I don't think California's experience is all that different in terms of timing. It depends on what we're working on. everything runs through the data center with the Rules Committee. So if we're getting ideas, it's because we have a technology roadmap and our IT people are working with the Rules Committees to provide information, including the Senate. The Senate participates with respect to technology, and then it's run through our budget process, through a gate process, is whether the project makes it through that gate. Depending on the urgency for the members, maybe about a year when you go through the gate process. But we also develop iteratively, so we do things kind of out the gate and then add to it through maintenance releases. So honestly, our bill drafting system, we're still doing maintenance releases several years out to update it.
And Mr. Moe, as you answer too, and maybe Ms. Fine, do you find that your process is insulated from political influence, from one chairman who has an idea and he's powerful or she's powerful, and you feel like you have to implement it versus going through a vetting process to determine whether it's a applicable idea?
So first of all of my staff are civil service, so they're not legislative employees, so they don't feel like they're at will. So that helps in both the legal side and the IT side. Sometimes it just depends on who the chair of the Rules Committee is and how interested that person is in IT on either side. But I think we feel pretty insulated right now to work with the Rules Committees in partnership to get to the goals of the members.
Mr. Chairman, I know the time expired, but is it okay if Mr. Moe answered
Sure, go ahead.
on Mr. Davis's time here?
Yeah. You got Pocan left too.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Graves. So under Virginia, we have essentially a two-step process here, one for new ideas. And any idea can be generated, and it's a form I've set up that's specifically insulated from any political or procurement effort. And just a new idea box, so suppliers can come in or country and they present the idea in a forum demonstrated to all the agencies. In this case, would be members of agencies. What do you like? What do you want? And it is by charter. This is what I learned when I went down. It's by charter to be separate, so there's no influence. Say, good idea, love it. And then we vet those, and the people that actually vote on that, or not vote, but give me information, are the agency IT representatives and the agency heads and the COs say, yeah, we want that. And if there's enough of that, we move that separately into a procurement process. That was the informal way. Any idea can come in that way. That's why, because who knows what's out there. And then the other one is more of a governance perspective when things get more gelled and I want to roll it into a service model. There's strict governance on that from an IT investment perspective to make sure if we roll something out here, it doesn't either step on or I can use it and have complementary efforts going forward. That's more of the procurement governance process. Those are both set up.
Mr. Pocan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here. I'm sorry I missed your testimony. I had another meeting, but if I'm asking something you've responded to, just let me know. But I came from 14 years in the Wisconsin legislature, so we had great nonpartisan entities that did this. Had some really great programs where you could go to a bill and from there get all the lobbying information really simply, really intuitively. My question, though, is I also spent 30 years as a small business owner, and I look at some of the trends there where people are doing things like chat windows, where people are doing things like Zendesk and those programs that I think people are going to get very used to. They don't seem to be fads or going away. I think they're going to be the new level of how quickly you get responses from businesses, and it's going to be expected perhaps at some point for us. And I was just wondering if you could respond to like that. Is there anything out there that you're looking at that you're seeing as some trends that can make us provide even better customer service? Because I remember the days when we just had Ledge Hotline was the way you got the messages before we had the emails. And, you look back now, you'd think that's, extremely antiquated. But the trends in business in this area, what are some of the things that you're looking at or you're seeing maybe some other legislatures or other governmental entities using? I'm going to start, Mr. Moen, either way.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Congressman Pocan. The innovation in that area is being driven by the individual 63 agencies of the Commonwealth. I set up the contract structure for them and they get to do it. We are seeing is a plethora of areas where people use artificial intelligence for processing call center and applications, and those are really groundbreaking ideas that they can go do. And so that's part of it. As far as other applications at the other end, I'll have to find out for you, but that's where we're seeing specifically in the area of Medicaid expansion.
Thank you, Congressman. I can speak to that. So we actually do use Zendesk at our help desk. So we have a help desk as part of our customer support group, and so our staff and members know to call that number. It's a memorized number. We publish it around campus. Everyone knows it. We're also looking at chat windows because it's really easy technology to use. We find that hasn't been adopted as much. People like a phone call or an email. We also have a call service, so no one waits in a queue. So if all of our help desk agents are busy, particularly during session, we do have a call service. We've also been using the notion of soft phones, so people can extend their desk phone to wherever they are on campus. So if our agents are out, our customer support group agents are out helping someone, the call to their desk phone will come right to their cell phone. So we've been experimenting with that as well, because our value proposition is that personal interaction, not going to a queue. When they start to get that, they can outsource that, which means they can outsource us. So we're utilizing a lot of tools in that way.
Okay, thank you.
So I don't know that we're using any new technology, but for members, every member office has a liaison from our data center who's available to them pretty much 24/7 by phone, and we have a pretty robust call-in center as well. You know, I'll say on some of the things outward-facing, like Facebook or Instagram, we've been a little slow, believe it or not, in California to adopt that internally as kind of an institutional way to communicate. And we do use our constituent management system, which was developed internally for dealing with our constituents.
Thank you very much. I'd yield back.
Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the witnesses. Mr. Moe, I'd like to start with you. You, as has been noted already, you have a very unique perspective on modernizing Congress with your former position as a CIO and now with your current position in Virginia. In your opinion, what are some of the unique challenges that the House faces when it comes to an IT perspective, and what changes do you recommend the House make to really encourage more innovation?
Congressman Davis, thank you very much for that question. First, I'll talk about the challenges of going forward, of innovation. From my perspective, my remember here is that we were highly focused on making sure the individual members had what they need to get done, to legislate and move on. We worked within the understanding of that the constitutional aspects of the speech or debate clause, working with the House General Counsel. And so those are some of the areas we focused on, making sure that we didn't get too sideways with that from an innovation perspective and rolling out new services. It was just making sure that we provided that level of aspect. The other aspect of your question, bear with me, what was it again?
What can we do at the House level to encourage more innovation?
Innovation.
I mean, you had to be frustrated by some of the bureaucracy within the House.
Yes. So here's innovation. To encourage innovation, what I would suggest you do as part of my testimony is look at where at the end of the day where the House is on the risk-reward innovation schedule, a spectrum, and accept the fact that things aren't going to go well or not go as timed, and then set up an architecture, contracts architecture that allows for that, and the service allows for that, and allows for competition. That will drive innovation and service model. And so for us, we did it with a non-exclusionary clause for any of our contracts. It's like Legos, you can bolt them on. And so that will introduce innovation because suppliers will want to come in, do good ideas. In my experience here, companies want to do business with the House of Representatives. They wanted to jump in and solve problems. I saw it after the event we had on the Dasha letter on October 17th, the anthrax letter. Companies want to solve the problems. They're just given the field to do that. So from my perspective, that would set up the innovation, set up the forum that they can come in, get their ideas, and compete, and then provide services, and then as a structure, make sure that you have an ability to provide feedback and also vet them if they don't do well.
Okay, competition provides innovation.
Innovation and behavior. There's no perfect contract, there's no service level, but if you provide competition, behavior, and the barrier to entry is experienced, then what we're seeing is that the companies we're dealing with will bend over backwards to serve the 63 separate member agencies of the Commonwealth.
Well, thank you for your comments. I happen to agree that some of the structural problems we have within the House and getting new and innovative products in is the basic contractual issues that we have, and I believe also a lack of an ability to move beyond existing comfort zones, and you won't ever become innovative unless you're willing to do that. Thank you for your comments. Ms. Boyer-Vine, in your testimony you mentioned Sacramento's proximity to Silicon Valley, and how the Legislative Data Center has contracts with many different tech vendors. Here in the House, we oftentimes face unique challenges in getting some of those cutting-edge technologies that the private sector is already using. I'm sure as a state legislature, you also have to jump through similar legal hoops when working with a vendor on certain technology. What are some recommendations or best practices you have found that successfully worked at bringing in some of the private sector technology that other companies are already taking for granted that should be used by the government?
I think because of our proximity, we don't have real challenges in having those companies want to come forth and work with us.
Are there barriers that exist within your current structure of government vendor practices that discourage it?
We have, with the state legislature, some real good ability to contract much more quickly, I think, than our state executive branch brethren have. So we haven't found those to be problematic for us. For example, we
should have that too, but sometimes we get caught up in inertia here.
Yeah, so we really haven't had that issue on the bidding or contracting side of it, and we've done some actual kind of beta testing for like an XML database for our bill drafting system, and we had a great partnership with a company on that.
Great. Well, I appreciate your testimony, and what you're doing here today is bringing attention to issues that don't usually make it into the 24-hour news cycle, but are very important to the way that we're able to create an environment that not only trains, but retains people who do great work for this country. So thank you for your time, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Newhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, we talked last week about one of the changes we'd like to make is not have committees overlap, and guess what? I had a committee overlapping, and I couldn't be in two places at one time. So apologize for my being late and I missed your testimony. I do have your written testimony. Just real quickly, probably at the risk of having questions that were already asked. First of all, Mr. Rohrbach, thank you very much for coming from all the way from the great state of Washington, and welcome to the other Washington.
Thank you, Congressman. It's an honor.
Yeah, good to have you here. And so I'll direct most of my thoughts to you just because of my tardiness, but a couple things that I think that I've got some experience in the state of Washington with, so I'm interested to hear your input, but also some things that I think are going on maybe there and in other states too. I've often lamented the fact that we don't have red line versions of legislation. We can't see easily what the impact of a proposed bill idea would be to current law. We do that in Washington. It seems to be pretty, we rely on that a lot. We've been doing it a long time. Any thoughts on some of the challenges that maybe we could overcome or learn from your guys' experience in other states as well, if you do that, and how we could adopt that here in Congress?
Well, sir, this question actually came up earlier, and because I'm not a legislative expert, process expert, I will have to get back to the committee on that. I have a general understanding of what we do with our systems in that regard, but I would probably defer to Diane on that.
Thank you. Yes, California does do it fairly well, I think. We switched to an XML bill drafting system, which with all the markup allows for better comparison. Yeah. So we're now and we're required to set out the statute fully each time we amend it. I don't think Congress has that same type of rule. So every time you see a statute as amended, it is the last amended form of that law. And then our system allows to compare each amended version of the bill to the underlying existing law on our public website. So it's a lot of transparency. Good. But it was really, the only way we could do that was to move to that XML bill drafting system.
Good to know. Good to know. Also wanted to learn a little bit, and maybe other states do this as well, but the remote testimony that's being made available, I don't know if it's on a trial basis or if it's been fully adopted, but just how's that going, and kind of a check-in on to see, because we're considering similar.
Yes, sir. So the remote video testimony has been used in our Senate for going on 4 years now. The initial notion was that, our state has a big mountain range that divides us between east and west, as you know. So the initial premise.
Thank God for that, right?
Depends what side of the mountains you're on. The initial premise was that citizens who could not afford to, quite frankly, to come to Olympia and testify should still be able to participate in the legislative process. So the notion that came out of our Senate was that we would do a remote video testimony for public testimony, and that we would use the community and technical college system throughout the state as the locations, as our partner locations. We've run into significant policy challenges with that, meaning the community and technical colleges have other priorities. Their priorities are not necessarily to staff and support remote testimony. And so one of the policy issues that still has not quite been figured out is that, so this physical constraints we have in a committee hearing room when you're present just aren't there remotely. We found that it's been better utilized for remote witness testimony. So, for example, this testimony, although I'm honored to come out here, we could have coordinated this with me back in my office. So we found that that's come in really handy. And the House of Representatives we have a work group right now that's going to make recommendations on how they should utilize remote video testimony in our committee hearings.
Any experience in other states, Virginia, California? Another thing that I'm interested in just a short few seconds I have left, I think you mentioned the PAGE program somewhere in your testimony, and we had one here. One of the challenges of, although there were several, but one of them is what would they do? With the advances in technology, there's not messages to be carrying around, that kind of thing. How has the PAGE program in Washington State kind of evolved in our new technology advanced world?
Yes, sir. I think even with advancements in technology, there's still plenty for them to do. They still follow the members around. They're still on the floor. And so there's still a lot of running back and forth because oftentimes on the floor when they're in the chamber, the members aren't really sitting there at their laptops exchanging messages. They still do a lot of old school message communication. So there's still plenty for them to do.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. I'd like to invite if there's committee members who want to follow up or pull on any strings that we heard about. I believe, Mr. Woodall, you had...
Two quick strings.
Please, go for it.
Mr. Moe, we've talked a lot about having a second system here for legislators and bandwidth, but when you set the system up, you did set up a separate system for legislators and staff. Why did we end up taking that down?
I'll have to look at that. If I recall, it was a separate, I'll answer your questions. I have to go with more details in that. If I recall, it was set up for a specific reason for bandwidth and for certain types of Wi-Fi traffic that specifically were for security reasons we wanted to parse off to the side. But it has been a couple of years since I've thought about that. But it was designed specifically because we wanted to make sure that the individuals who use that particular Wi-Fi system didn't get anywhere near the rest of the things.
And Ms. Boyer-Vine, you talked a lot about the legislative system from a votes on the floor perspective, legislation on the floor. Is that set up individually for all of California's committees? And so there's no committee paperwork going on there either? Amendments are being published in real time for committee members, testimony in real time for committee members? Have we extended that paperlessness all the way down to the day-to-day operations of committees?
It actually started with the committee services application. Probably not amendments in real time because they have to be adopted, but they do see the amendments. But yes, they're getting committee analyses from their staff. They're getting the support and opposition letters. They're getting the agenda all electronically through the committee services application that's funneled through the portfolio that I mentioned.
Proposed amendments not being handed out by committee staff, but being populated on the
I believe that's
iPad.
correct.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else? Okay. With that, I'd like to thank our witnesses for their testimony. I know several of you have come from far away, and I do appreciate that. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit additional written questions to the witnesses, for the witnesses to the chair, which will be forwarded to the witnesses for their response. I ask our witnesses to please respond as promptly as you are able. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit extraneous materials to the chair for inclusion in the record. I would like to express gratitude to the Ways and Means Committee for sharing the room with us, and to the staff for putting this together, and for the person doing transcription. Thank you. And with that, this hearing is adjourned.